trying to make games post-work. The Blackjack Wiz. Jumping around a lot here in my timeline. I had left Electronic Arts in Canada and joined Microsoft Xbox division in Washington State, back into the United States of America. And then let's fast forward to after I had left my job at Microsoft and moved to Nevada and no longer had a job or could even work. I imagined that maybe I could write small apps for phones and tablets and eke out an okay living in my sunset years as my mind seemed to be degenerating. Of course, at the time, I did not know that I was suffering neurodegeneration. But things were seemingly stupidly hard. It made no sense how slow and hard things seemed to be for me, given my past brilliance and speed of learning things and creating software. Well, to the tale of making my first and last app, there were many weekends when I lived in Southern California that I would drive to Las Vegas and play blackjack at casino tables. I started out gambling in the smaller casinos to make sure that I knew what I was doing before I rose to the big leagues of gambling. My innate near photographic memory combined with quick area scanning and internal math calculator substantially improved my blackjack game winning to loss ratios, such that I regularly started with a few $100s and ended the weekend with several $1,000s. Yes, there were occasional weekends that I lost a few $1,000s despite my card counting abilities. In fact, once I became convinced the casino was cheating, I was winning continuously, and the pit boss tapped the dealer's shoulder to replace him with another smooth-talking, serious dealer. The pro dealer smiled and flung cards like throwing star shurikens, and they landed right under one another perfectly, like he just leaned over and gently inserted them. The only words he ever spoke, really, were what the next card was going to be. And he was never wrong. He predicted every single card, what it was going to be before it was ever shown. It was apparent that the dealer was not there just to win back the casino's money, but he was there to discourage everybody from continuing to play and winning at all. Well, it worked. Everyone, including me, left. Of course, I just changed the casinos that I went to and used the smaller casino discouragement as reason to move up to the bigger casinos, where the sea was vaster and there was much more money flowing. I graduated to the huge casinos like Caesar's Palace, the Bellagio, Circus, Excalibur, MGM Grand, and so forth. I imagined that I could be just as successful and lucrative as the smaller casinos, but be less noticeable in the massive crowds at the huge casinos. It must sound ridiculous for me to allege that I regularly converted a few $100s into several $1,000s. My main limitation was the drive to Las Vegas was long, and traffic between Southern California and Vegas was extremely long in miles and the hours it took to drive them. And then there was the sheer boredom of repetitively playing blackjack for hours and hours on end. My weekend blackjack gaming became a job, and with the unpredictability of winning or losing, combined with my commitment to my children's care and child support, I would only go to Vegas maybe 6 or 12 times a year. But during those trips, because I typically won so much, the casinos would offer me frequent gambling loyalty points for future hotel stays and meals and shows. And they would often offer immediate deals for free meals or overnight stays, in hopes that I might stay longer and keep gambling, giving them a chance to win their money back. They would hope my winning streak would come to an end. Casinos were so motivated to reclaim their lost cash that they would send me offers in the mail for free weekend shows for me and friends, all comped, all free. Some friends were so dismayed that they said I must be like Rain Man from the movie with my ability to count cards and reliably predict the next series of cards and win. I never felt confident to spend more than my allotted $300 to $600, maximum for a weekend gambling budget. I admit there were a few times that I went to $900 before aborting my gambling for that trip. But usually I was good at not exceeding my $600 cap. And given many visits garnered $2,000 to $3,000 or more in winnings, I never worried about the weekends that I came home a loser. I hated so much being a loser, though, that it took those incentives the casinos offered me to get me to go back and give it another shot after a loss. Ironically, the casinos reduced their loyalty perks so much as they tightened their fiscal belts over the years that I stopped going to Vegas and gambling, except when friends explicitly were going to go anyway and asked me to tag along. Although my father, Silver Seaborn, had a severe, addictive gambling problem, it appeared that I was good and did not have a gambling addiction at all. Or my intelligence and willpower was so strong that it was able to moderate and control it, so it never manifested. One of my first games that I wrote was Monte Carlo, which was a gambling simulation on the Apple IIgs computer. Monte Carlo was a suite of casino games intended to let the player play those games themselves or with friends or against just a computer with AI opponents, like bot gamblers. I had a lot of personal gambling experience and engineering history developing gambling games with Monte Carlo. I had spent much of my career in the trenches, as well as strategically directing design and architecture. 30 years later, I was well positioned to develop a game independently, I felt, and I could make a gambling game easily. With my mixed background of technology, video game development, artificial intelligence, popular gambling game knowledge, and the math behind blackjack and card counting, I conceived the Blackjack Wiz, a gambling app simulation for iPhone, iPad, Apple TV, Android phones and tablets, and television. I even made an Xbox One version, but that was never published. The Blackjack Wiz was the natural product for me to make as my pioneering return to freelance game development in sort of forced retirement. It offered customizable blackjack rules to match most variants used throughout the world. The game included an artificial intelligence that monitored the player's behavior and winning-loss record associated with it and rated both against its own AI projected play and outcomes without cheating by using its internal data, and advised the player on what should be played or what should have been played when the player does something suboptimal, which it considers wrong, less right. Beyond the sophisticated gambling AI and natural language advisor on how to play blackjack using virtually all variants across the globe, the game also taught most forms of card counting and further allowed the player to create their own card counting rules to explore if they could devise a superior technique. And the game had all the trappings and bells and whistles of contemporary games: splashy graphics and animation, many musical tracks and sound effects, achievements and instructional pop-ups and overlays. The Blackjack Wiz was a complete and extremely thorough educational gambling simulation with a vast array of configurable rules and options and card counting instruction. I made it, like I said, for Apple iPhone, Apple iPad, Apple TV, Android phone, Android tablet, and Android TV. I also made it for Windows 10 and the Windows Phone. And, of course, I mentioned Xbox. The last one was the only one that did not get published. My wife Catherine made a professional-grade website and marketing materials that we needed to offer it for online purchase. We sold Blackjack Wiz for $2.99 to $4.99 on the Microsoft, Google Play, and Apple App Stores. There was one huge challenge to creating Blackjack Wiz though: me. I began writing Blackjack Wiz as my neurodegeneration was taking hold and clouding my mind and making things harder and harder to focus. And I would break into strange emotional throes of sobbing and sorrow. None of that was like me before, ever. There was no way to comprehend why I struggled so much making the game Blackjack Wiz, until it became apparent that I was suffering mental cognizant decline, and with eventual diagnosis confirming and explaining what was going on, I had to give up making any more games. I could not even update and maintain the Blackjack Wiz. I found that my mental acuity outside of highly familiar rote procedures like drawing a sphere or using a long-used, extensive, and advanced vocabulary had been falling precipitously from where it had been throughout my life. As best I can surmise, my cognizant capabilities had deteriorated to about 70% of what I think it had been, which I contend made me normal at best now. But my 70% cognizance was catastrophic and devastating to my ability to remember and mitigate risks and dependencies on any work that I was doing. It resulted in odd gaps of knowledge that were bottlenecks to finishing sections of code or application features. My reduced mental acuity translated into things that might take minutes, took days. It took me months to write a program that should have been done in under 1 month, given my history and background. Only a few years earlier, I had programmed as a hobby a complex script-based adventure game engine, and now I could barely write a blackjack simulation, albeit an advanced one. Things proceeded to become more and more challenging and difficult for me. I had spent a year and a half following Blackjack Wiz with disappointment in both its sales and experiencing corporate business manipulation by Apple, saying that I had to incorporate to indemnify them from selling gambling games. And then there was the relentless mandated SDK and security update releases that were expected by Google, Android and TV, Microsoft Windows for their tablet and phone and platform OS, and Apple iOS for its phone, tablet, and TV. I believe there were updates for every platform that required virtually work from me every few months. It was insane just to keep up with the endless updates just for their SDKs, never mind trying to add a feature or polish. Ultimately, maintaining Blackjack Wiz was an insane and impossible task for me going forward. I abandoned the game entirely, and with it, I abandoned my professional game-making career. The Blackjack Wiz Part 2. It took a few years of languishing in my neurodegeneration and going to doctor after doctor in hopes of securing a diagnosis, if not a treatment or cure. But no doctor or hospital or clinic ever had a solution or treatment or cure. Eventually, a psychiatrist agreed that no one with my successful history would or could fabricate the litany of problems, and moreover, dropping precipitously from a studio manager at Microsoft to an unemployed, struggling to function, much less working person. The psychiatrist also observed my behavior was inappropriate and consistent with a number of serious psychiatric disorders, including bipolar and manic depressive and obsessive compulsive, and those kinds of disorders, many more that I do not even recall. The bottom line the psychiatrist concluded I was messed up in the head, regardless of whether it was caused by physical brain degeneration or chemical imbalances or any other reason. And consequently, the doctor recommended treating the symptoms without a definitive diagnosis. And to that end, he agreed that he would support Mayo Clinic doctor's evaluation that I was totally disabled. Although the diagnosis was a lot to process and internalize, I had to accept it. After all, how could I deny my long list of physical and mental and emotional problems and instabilities? I was messed up in the head, it seemed. At least for once, there was a doctor that was at least validating me, even if it was a negative conclusion. After months and years passed with adjusted medications, I found the motivation to write my life's story as an autobiography. But I did not want to write a boring recounting of my life's experiences. No, I wanted to write about my life's experiences under the lens of insight and my values and how the world might be a better place if people just paid attention and learned from my own journey through hell difficulty. I wanted to write my autobiography as an insightful adventure. Of course, I know that I am not alone in living a hard life. I recognize millions, if not billions, of people hurt and struggle throughout their lives. Some never have many positive, good things happen for them at all. And yet they all live and die like everyone else. Rich or poor, we all have our struggles. Some hurt more than others. And to the poor souls that hurt more than most, or live lives filled with torment, I offer my sympathy and my tale of sorrowful challenges that were overcome until my very essence and being was stripped from me gradually so that I might witness my own loss of reality and self. Please, I implore those living their own hell difficulty to never give up and to fight and fight until your fight is over completely. And as Dylan Thomas's poem said, do not go gently into that good night. In writing my autobiography entitled Hell Difficulty, I decided to write the tale as what might happen if one pivotal event happened that sent Richard into the legal and psychiatric system. Within the system, Richard's neurodegeneration would be exacerbated by forcing him to unseal and relive his long suppressed, soul-crushing memories. Richard's difficult upbringing and childhood through young adult experiences had long been corked and sealed inside bottles high up on a forget-about-me shelf. But now the doctors are making Richard remember all of those terrible things in his life all at once, and it is breaking him. It is making him become progressively Richard, the hell-challenged and hellscape journey like Dante Alighieri. Richard, the defender and true knight of righteousness. Richard, the fulcrum that humankind will be judged by. Richard, the worn knight of woeful countenance. Richard, Quixote, spiritual embodiment of Cervantes' dream. Indeed, remembering all the tragic events in my life all at once may seem too much. And so for the fictional Richard, it's too much for him to bear. It does break him. And that is why the fictional story has Richard find himself under psychiatric care. It is his treatment in life that drove him and left his sanity somewhere on the road. It drove him mad into his quixotic misadventures. As to my writing this experience, as to my authoring Hell Difficulty, it was hard. It was hell difficult to write. I have shared challenges throughout my story, but the key point is that doing anything is hard for me now. Doing something that other people must understand and not offend them is especially difficult for me now. Even with the immense power and capabilities of syntax, grammar, spelling, sentence structure, and even social appropriateness of programs like Microsoft Word, and access to the world's memory through the internet, I still struggled to write. But I was determined to write. I have managed to write my first past drafts and some edits, and I have recorded what I could. There is much more that I have left out. I will try to record it too. I try to write a few pages every few days. That's an accomplishment for me. It has given me purpose, things to do and look forward to, even if it has driven me to tears as I relive my suppressed sorrows in my reality. My confused mind was not limited to writing. Many mornings and evenings I would find myself so foggy-brained where I struggled to focus or follow conversation topics. I often felt I was not there. For sure, in any case, I was not always there. I was not all there. I was aware of my difficulties, and I could see how my brain was foggy and suffered slow and diminished capabilities. I could tell it was not just the result of being tired or stressed or not getting sufficient sleep or quality sleep. My challenges finding the right words in the moment during conversation got worse and worse. My activities sometimes stalled mid-action, with my losing ability to change course or even initiate a new action. It was crazy. I could find myself standing in the shower thinking that I was done, but unable to stop from standing there. Sometimes for minutes under the shower head, thinking to stop, but somehow unable to stop. Emotions and anxiety interfered with my ability to stay focused or feel creative or be effective at expressing my thoughts or emotions. The result is me and others being upset, often, and then me being more upset because I uncontrollably created the very situation in the first place that caused such unhappiness. Worst, perhaps, is the relationship erosion. Over time, my mind leaps to crazy places. I reach wild conclusions that aren't true, and I go into conversation spots impatiently as though I already know the answer. I offend everybody. I apparently am rude, unintentionally obnoxious, sometimes with the importance of concluding a topic since it was already evident to me and I had to make sure they know. So why waste any time hearing their words spew further? Obviously, that's not me. But something in my inner supervisor is no longer the executive in control of me. I don't have consistent executive function. I don't even have consistent functional control over basic emotions and thoughts. All the things that I had learned on how to influence and constructively engage with people was largely melting away. And despite my effort and decision to be patient and wait to the end of topics for people speaking and sharing, including my own wife, but I somehow cut them off. I'm rude. I speak over them. Sometimes I even speak erroneous conclusions. It has become evident that whenever I am ignorant of something, even in the slightest, my inner supervisor brain freaks out and it initiates an emotional outburst of irrationality, fury, anger, rage, intense frustration, exaggerated anxiety, and sometimes even suicidal ideation in those extremely despondent situations. Thankfully, that passes. Whenever my inner supervisor detected a problem or an anomalous perception or behavior, things went awry and typically resulted in my melting down and becoming useless for the rest of the day and night, and often unpleasant to be around, or at least so I imagine. Tragically, all of my hard work and effort and suffering and sorrow and tears making the Blackjack Wiz translated into self-doubt and personal discovery of my horrific mental decline and neurodegeneration. At that time, the nightmare extended to Catherine as well as me, because she cannot just sit there and watch me hurt without hurting herself, because she loves me. How much money did we earn for the Herculean feat of Blackjack Wiz? Well, I suppose we may have earned a few $100s in sales. No, making the Blackjack Wiz, while insightful about my mental decline, was not worth the immense effort and the harm that it took on me and my wife. The game had a short life, and it will be lost to the annals of time as a blip in my career, at a time in my life when there were fewer days ahead than behind.